Good day, friends. Today there will be analytical issue about the events in Ukraine. We will consider the possible and obvious reasons for the outbreak of armed conflicts 8 years ago and turned into a more extensive 1 week ago. We try to be as objective as possible and show the situation from a net neutral point of view. We have collected the material literally bit by bit and will provide you with all evidence of our information. You water, you make yourself. We begin. It must be said that until 1991, Ukraine was part of the USSR, and in fact, it was part of Russia. The USSR was a multinational state after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Many Russians remained to live in Ukraine, while Ukrainians remain in the Russian Federation. Residents of neighboring countries continued to communicate, create families and businesses, share experiences, go to work in neighboring countries. However, over time, the mood in Ukraine began to change. The country was divided into camps. The territories bordering the Russian Federation were loyal, and Western Ukraine increased anti-Russian sentiment. Fascism began to raise its head. The streets of cities in Ukraine began to be called by the names of the criminals of the Second World War. A typical example is Stepan Bandera Avenue in the capital of Ukraine. 8 years ago, after the Orange Revolution, and in fact after the coup d'etat part of Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk regions did not recognize the government of Ukraine as legitimate and declared their independence. Historically, in the territory of Lugansk and Donetsk, live Russian-speaking, in fact, Russian people. The armed forces of Ukraine have been shelling and bombing Donetsk and Luhansk for 80 years. During this time, more than 12,000 people and more than 200 children died. For 8 years ago, people lived under constant shelling, often without running water, electricity, or heating, without a normal supply of medicines and food. For comparison, 10,000 soldiers died during the 10-year war in Afghanistan for the entire period. To normalize relations between Russia and Ukraine, the Minsk agreements were reached which led to peaceful diplomatic negotiations. The Ukrainian side repeatedly delayed the implementation of the Minsk agreements and then completely refused to implement them. Many of you a week ago did not even know where Ukraine is, and you did not know all what was happening on its territory. You did not know how Ukrainian nationalists burned people in building in Odessa, how they gouged out their eyes and strangled them with telephone wires, how the punitive detachment Azov was created from the Ukrainians. The refusal to implement the Minsk agreements forced the Russian government to recognize the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk. In response to this, the armed forces of Ukraine increased their shelling of these regions. Independence observers were present of the territory on Ukraine, however they recorded on military operations in the territory of conflict. We will leave a link to this site in the description. Everyone can go to the site. This site have date and see what happened during this period. The map clearly shows that shelling and bombing were. The Russian government has repeatedly called on the world community to call on Ukraine to implement the Minsk agreements, but the calls went unanswered. A few days later, we learned that the Russian Federation launched a special operation on the territory of Ukraine. We observed that the Russian army does not threaten the civilian population of Ukraine. Now we come to the most important aspect. Please note that Putin, over the past 3 months, has repeatedly addressed the heads of Europe and Ukraine, in particular on the implementation of the Minsk agreements as a guarantee of peace, respect for sovereignty, and good relations. Macron answered with understanding. The other heads of the state urged Ukraine to adhere to the agreements reached, but the result was negative. The next important aspects, we see how the Ukrainian side is dragging out negotiations on the termination of the operation on its territory. During the second round of negotiation, Ukraine refused to comply with the requirements of the Russian Federation. All Zelensky conversations turned out to be empty words. I ask you, my dear viewer, to answer only one question. Imagine yourself as the president if you love your people, your country. What are you ready for? What can you do to stop hostilities? On the scales, on your ambitions and thirst for power, and on the other hand, the well-being of people and a peaceful existence. Moreover, it is already clear to everyone that sovereignty of Ukraine is not threatened by the Russian Federation. Did you answer this question for yourself? Now you can see and evaluate the actions of European countries and the United States. Everyone forgot the negotiations that were so actively conducted in the last 3 months. Today, we see endless deliveries of weapons from Europe and America. What does it mean? Is this help for Ukraine? Are these calls for peace? Is this an attempt to resolve the conflict? No, this is the direct desire to prolong hostilities, increase losses from the Ukrainian and Russian sides, and observe from a comfortable apartment. What will happen there? Is this called having avoided the word community, paid attention to what's happening in Ukraine a week ago? Friends, thank you for watching to the end. Let's discuss the current situation. Your opinion is important to us. Subscribe to our channel. They tell you the truth here. Thank you.